Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Hello. Boots and cats and boots and cats and boots and boots and cats. Just gotta wait for this to catch up to where I am so we can worry about audio mixing and stuff. Let's make sure that I'm not getting drowned out by music or anything like that. Wanna make sure that's not an issue. Gotta keep everything balanced. That would be nice. Maybe turn it down just a little bit more. Oh, adjusting some music levels really quickly because we are a one-woman show, and that is, you know, the way we gotta roll. Actually, I'm probably going to need to do something. Again, we want you to be able to hear the video at all. Let's see how that sounds instead. How does that sound? How does this? How does this sound? Test, test, test. You know, how does that sound? How does this? How does that volume though? That is my problem. I think we're gonna need to do this. I think we're gonna need to do this to make sounds good and audible for that did. Let's see if it's currently, because I know that was what my biggest problem used to be, is that my streams were just impossible to fucking hear, which is always what you want. Always what you want. And let's try this. What my biggest problem used to be is that my streams were just impossible to fucking hear. Let's do that. Always what you want. Always what. Turn it up a little bit more just to make sure. It's gonna be an echo in like 38 seconds. And now we can worry about making sure that you can hear any of this music. And now it's fine. Let's see what we think of this. It's a process, it's a process. Just a tish bit. Let's increase it just a tish bit. Let's see what that ends up sounding like. Almost there. Then we can get this party on the road. That's not the phrase. That's not the phrase. this might be it, and then my last try, and then we're going to go ahead and get going. Otherwise, we are just about ready to do our little chat about the Congo. Okay. Let's start. First and foremost, though, as always, we want to go over links that are down in the bio. As always, pretty much the same group of links. If I have been effective at updating them, I know for a while there it was just not saving the links that I could have sworn I put in there. Like, I don't know why Snappa and them weren't down in there, and I just... Let's go over the links. Let's go over the links. Links that are down below. My books, if you want to support me at all, or if you just want to read them, because these two books are available for free on Itchio. The link for the Itchio, specifically the Imani and Aaliyah link, is down there. But you can take that, like, go there, go to the author account, and then that'll have the other book. Those are books that I write. That is the left is the Queen of Thieves, A New Throne. That is my Y Spy series. And the right is Imani and Aaliyah's Fashion Bible, my new adult romance. Both are linked down below. Both are available for free on Itchio. You can also tip there or purchase elsewhere, whatever you want to do. Also linked down below, the very first link is going to be for the Friends of the Congo YouTube channel. That is going to be a much better resource to get information about the crisis in the Congo. So I would highly suggest checking out the information that they have been sharing and that they have been creating and putting out around the topic and the subject. Next, we also have down there fundraiser links. This link should be for a, not amalgamation, but a curated list of GoFundMe's for people in crisis zones. So you've got Sudan, you've got Haiti, you've got Congo, you've got Palestine, you've got Caribbean, a lot of different crisis zones, lots of different GoFundMe's available there. That is going to be the tiny URL link down there under fundraisers. And we've got Non-Zionist Graphic Design programs. I have been made aware in this past year that Canva is a Zionist organization, and so my goal is to try and fully pull all of my things off of Canva and no longer use them. I was able to, all of the new graphics, so really just my thumbnail, new graphics that I have made were not made on Canva, but I still have things that are on there, and it's because of how a lot of first-party platforms work like this, especially like first-party online platforms work. It's really hard for me to, and like a process to get all of the files and assets that I have on there off. And that's taken a lot of time and energy and far more than I was expecting. But we are planning to fully divest from them. And so I have listed below, for anyone who's interested, non-Zionist graphic design programs, including Snappa and Inkscape, which Inkscape is the one that I'm currently using. And I believe those are the important links down below. So let's get started on talking about the Congo. So if you aren't aware already, the big issue and the main focal point of the situation going on in the Congo, it's primarily surrounded around cobalt. What is cobalt? According to the article that I read from the National Geographic, it is a metal commonly used to make lithium-ion batteries, which are found in items such as electric vehicles, computers, smartphones, and even e-cigarettes. And it's important for us to address this now, because as the West pushes forward with the green environmental initiatives, more will be demanded of the regions these resources come from. Global demand for cobalt is expected to grow fourfold by 2030, according to a white paper report from the World Economic Forum, largely thanks to widespread adoption of electric vehicles. And I have, like, now if y'all can see, a lot of the, just a reference to a lot of the articles and the titles of the articles and stuff that I have been reading. Another article and source I was looking at was the WBUR, which is Boston's NPR, in which they did an interview with someone of the region. Or no, they did an interview with an expert on exploitation in the Congo, Christopher Paulin. And if you're looking at a Ford F-150 Lightning, we're looking, I think, almost at 180 pounds of just nickel in that battery. Chakabari. Each element serves a different purpose, but they all have one important thing in common. Without mining, there will not be a clean energy transition. And further, like, in that interview, someone mentioned that no one has stopped to see that as we are charging forward with this transition, are we trampling on anyone along the way? We have to address this enormous violence that is unleashed on the people of the Congo and the destruction of their environment just to save our own. And there is no time to waste. Joe Biden, the genocidal ruler that he is, was just, like, last week in Angola showing his support for a train that in Angola that will help the movement of resources out of the Congo and into our economy. So let's talk about the history of the Congo a bit to get a sense of why this is happening in Congo, why we got here, why the space. Way back when, it's a story we've heard before. Treaties were handed out in a language the locals couldn't understand, and those treaties were used to take claim over people's land. The man Stanley, who went out to discuss and make deals and learn about the resources of the areas of the Congo, went and had some 400 treaties signed with African rulers, and these treaties handed over their resources to King Leopold of Belgium. Leopold was brutal in his regime as he forced the people to mine for rubber, cutting off limbs if quotas were not met. As many as 10 million Congolese died under Leopold's rule, and in 1908, international pressure forced Leopold to turn the Congo Free State over to Belgium. However, they simply picked up where Leopold had left off. And a long-standing history of the International Court existing with different rules for the West, as after an investigation into attacks and looting of Congolese people and resources, the United States panel said it found substantial evidence of the Rwandan government supporting several of those armed groups. Those findings haven't stopped the European Union from partnering with Rwanda for these minerals, despite calls from the international human rights advocates who say these minerals from Rwanda are illegally obtained from Congo. Because at its core, the West doesn't want free anything. It wants control and profit at any cost. The Congo didn't have to look like this, but the West ensured it. And this is people, like Congolese people, speaking on how this cycle progresses. We elected Patrice Lumumba as our first prime minister, and he promised that he would use Congo's resources for the benefit of Congolese people. That was his bold anti-colonial nationalist vision for a free Congo. And within months, he was dispatched and assassinated by Belgian and neo-colonial Western powers. And in his place propped up a bloody, corrupt leader, Joseph Mobutu, who ran the country into the ground but continued the flow of Congo's valuable resources, especially its minerals, to Western countries. So Congolese people will say, you taught us the lesson within months of independence of what happens if we try to stake our own path. And so since then, it's been leader after leader just playing ball with the Western agenda. And that is a statement that is quite literal. The Soviet Union appeared to have been stockpiling cobalt, and according to a report by the CIA, the attack set off a round of panic buying and hoarding in the developed West. The West's solution to market instability was to prop up the country's dictator Mobutu Sese Seko, who presided over an almost sickly kleptocratic regime. That's a word that I pronounced correctly, sure. And from there, we move on to the modern Chinese exploitation of the Congo. this. Just ignore this. This didn't exist. This didn't exist. Congo went from genocide and oppression under the brutal regime of King Leopold, who was also abusing and extorting the people of their land's resources. This time, leaders made on paper deals with China to build infrastructure, create jobs, and solidify the nation in exchange for access to the resources. The work is done in a shoddy manner, and very crucially, Megana, it didn't lead to employment of Congolese people, which is desperately needed. Chinese construction companies imported Chinese laborers to do all of the work. And Chinese companies were incentivized to make money by whatever means possible, a sentence that never turns out well for the exploited people. And poor infrastructure is a core factor to the problems of the area. Much of the city still has no running water, infant mortality rates remains chronically high, and there's effectively no government schooling. Situation further has trickled into so many aspects of life, forcing so much to be centered around cobalt, including children's early days. I started working here when school stopped, he said. Many children here once attended government public schools, but when local authorities increased fees sixfold, which few parents could afford, many children were sent to the mines instead. And child labor is a very prominent aspect of the mines. Despite government ban on children working in the mines, there's little enforcement on the ground. This makes it nearly impossible for buyers to ensure a supply chain free of child labor. And I did not end up looking this up. I can look this up. We'll look it up now. But I believe recently in the United States, oh, it's only giving me this one article. It's only giving me this one story, which we will get to later. I'll look it up more another time. But recently, again, within this past year, some department in the government, in the United States government, declared that cobalt was a resource that could not be, like, there was no supply chain that could be distinguished from having child labor. So essentially all cobalt is to be assumed to have child labor. And that meant nothing to pretty much anyone. And if you're wondering why the Congolese government would agree to these deals with the Chinese government or wouldn't push back against such conditions, Kabila, the ruler at the time, pocketed a substantial amount of money in exchange for signing these deals. It was essentially bribe money and kickbacks to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars. Circling back to the importation of workers, the influx of Chinese workers being brought in and established as a higher class than the local people cut the Congolese out of the legal economy. Yeah, so they're at the bottom of what we call the formal economy and into the informal economy. So they're the nexus point between artisanal miners and the formal supply chain through these trading networks, these depots and buying houses that buy the production of artisanal miners. And them being pushed out of the legal economy is not simply them as workers, but it's also aspects of a deeply segregating them as citizens and consumers. One night in Kolwezi, I went to a Chinese-run casino with a few Congolese friends. I was immediately allowed inside, but they were stopped at the door and told they could not gamble. Black Africans, the casino staff explained, can't be trusted with money. The situation is also aggressively displacing them in very segregationist ways. In 2017, Chinese workers arrived in the village of Samukinda, half an hour northwest of Kasulo, and quickly constructed 24 houses with corrugated iron roofs. Kasulo residents were ordered to leave their neighborhood within 2 weeks. The Congolese government revealed that a mining permit had been granted to Congo Dongfang, which would remove the topsoil and the wall off what had once been the neighborhood. And because of the power imbalance leaning in the favor of the Chinese workers, they are also able to benefit heavily from the illegal cobalt trade. We've been told Chinese middlemen run a cobalt market inside. If they're buying cobalt, they're breaking the law. Only Congolese nationals are allowed to trade artisanal cobalt. And all of these things put together is leaving the locals with nothing. But jobless people from China are coming here to work while our local people are suffering. Minerals are going out and there is no investment coming back. In fact, we are being underdeveloped by what they are taking. It is killing us. There is no benefit. We will reach a time when the Congolese children of this generation will be saying that every foreigner, everyone around them has looted their lives. And looted is an incredibly appropriate word. I asked Zeke what he thought of people who profited from cobalt mining. I have sadness in my heart when I think of people who buy the minerals, he said. They make so much money and we have to stay like this. When I told him that Americans paid more than $1,000 for the latest iPhone, he replied, "It really hurts me to hear that." And with locals getting pushed out of the economy, corruption is high. Police in the area even accepting bribes from reporters to show their rights abuses in the mines. This is from an ABC article that I don't recall off the top of my head. I don't recall off the top of my head when this article was written, but it was like there's such a deep amount of bias in it from the sheer amount of privilege. There's literally a line in this article of them like gasping and clutching their pearls. Oh my God, we witnessed police committing a crime. And so there's definitely an extensive amount of privilege coming from that article, especially when they're discussing why kids aren't in school. But this is in terms of them talking about their experiences with the corrupt policing in the area. We were filming. The regional police superintendent arrives. We're told he's responsible for ensuring the mines are run safely and free of child labor. He tells us that if we give him $50, we can continue filming the kids who are mining. No problem. For another $20, he'll provide us with a police escort for the day. But there's only so much you can do at the end of the day when poking the ones that have the real money. Inside the police station, I reiterate to the chief that we're filming on a public road. He merely shrugs. The Chinese own that too. It's eye-opening to see just how deeply in the pockets of the Chinese the authorities really are here. And it's this kind of oppression that is a big part of why it's so hard to get reports out of the area that the Western public will sympathize with. So many people demanding photo and video evidence to remain engaged, not willing to believe the reports from Congolese sources. And because of how, like, I believe people were reporting, like, you can't, like, you will get arrested and assaulted if you have your phone out. So they can't be getting all of these phone recordings and things that Western people are craving in order to give attention to the issue. Okay. But that is not the only reason why this issue has not been getting as much attention and discussion as it should be. Though the idea has been getting more traction, it's not actually new information. It also isn't sticking with people even now, and that's simply because of the relationship folks in the West and global North have with labor as well as with forced black labor. When, for example, when exploitative conditions were found in Chinese factories, Apple stepped in and said, nope, we're going to do everything we can to increase the quality of work and human rights of those workers in our factories. The short answer is no one is taking responsibility for what's happening at the bottom of the global cobalt chains because it's African people in grinding poverty, and that's it, full stop. That's the short answer, and that's been the answer about the relationship between the global North and the continent of Africa going back centuries. Let's talk about the impact this is having on the people, starting with the conditions in the mines. They are toiling in what is described as subhuman conditions. They work in tunnels and open pit mines dug by hand, exposed to radiation, cave-ins, arrest, even death. Mostly economic migrants from Congo's impoverished interior. These freelance creuseurs, also known as artisanal miners, that's what was coming up earlier, is a term that belies the extreme hazards of their profession. Theirs is a deadly business. The conditions, as described earlier, are just extremely absurdly dangerous. They can't extract these nuggets without risking a cave-in. The men must go deeper. They drop down another vertical shaft. It was hot at the surface, but it's a furnace down here. 25 meters underground and 100 meters from where they began, they enter a small chamber and begin to dig. There's only 20 minutes worth of oxygen down here. What's more, copper and uranium are found alongside cobalt in Congolese mines. The latter is a known carcinogen. The uranium also releases a gas called radon gas, and in the mines, the radon levels are very, very high. Radon is a carcinogen that can lead to lung cancer, says Nemeri, but we don't know to what extent there's an increased amount of lung cancer in the area because it's an underserved area medically. The last person who escaped from the pit said that he saw a huge flame. Muutu told me the fire's origin was unclear, but artisanal miners can unearth pockets of flammable gases. And paternal occupational mining exposure was the factor most strongly associated with birth defects. And they are doing all of these things for a pitiful, pitiful payout. Their cobalt haul is tiny, worth a few dollars at most. Because of the terrible pay artisanal miners are able to find for their work, children often have to work the mines in order to keep the family afloat. Like hundreds of children in this town, Deomba made extra money for his family digging for cobalt. According to testimony from a lawsuit we'll talk about later, there's also a large, expansive amount of abusive dynamics within this atmosphere and within this environment. Several plaintiffs insist that they were trapped in a debt bondage situation where sponsors gave out food and funds as an advance but deducted the amount of the advance alongside with other costs from the plaintiff's earnings. Overall, the people are in a very, very horrible position. In Congo, more than 85% of people work informally in precarious jobs that pay little, and the cost of living is remarkably high because the country's infrastructure has been ravaged by decades of dictatorship, civil war, and corruption. There's little agriculture, and food and other basic goods are often imported. For many Kusulo residents, the prospect of a personal cobalt mine was worth any risk. And people get away with these abuses because, as mentioned earlier, the Chinese that have been brought into the area are the lowest tier of the legal economy. The artisanal miners, in order to make a living off the resources of their land, had to trespass into the mining areas given to Chinese corps, and it's extremely dangerous and a position that is easily exploited. Mine security patrols are known to chase, arrest, beat, and sometimes shoot at trespassers, but they are the risks the miners feel they must take. If they don't find cobalt, they don't eat. And further exploited they are. At some sites, the treatment of Congolese by their Chinese bosses is reminiscent of colonial period. In a video shared with me by Mutindi of Good Shepherd, a Congolese guard with Kalashnikov slung across his back beats a man who is lying semi-naked in the mud, his arms bound. Behind the camera, a man otherwise speaking Mandarin starts yelling "Piga," the Kishwali word for beat. In the background are 7 of the trucks that Congo Dongfang uses to transport cobalt ore. They recalled an incident that took place where he was 12. One Friday, we were sitting down and soldiers came into the mine. They caught us. They threw us on the ground. They sprayed us with water and they began to whip us. We began to cry and ask for mercy, and we swore to them that we would never come again to this place. And that's not all that has happened to children, because children are not exempt from these abuses. Although Congo's government periodically claimed that it was cracking down on child labor, few adults tried to stop him from working. Soldiers would hunt us, he recalled. If they caught you, they would beat you, he went on. If you sold your minerals when you had money, there were street kids, thugs, who would stop you on the road and snatch your money. To pass safely, you had to pay 500 francs, about 50 cents, so you could have safe passage. If you gave them nothing, they would beat you. And as seen in so many imperial conflicts, sexual abuse is rampant. This is seen from authorities as a means of, again, enforcing their power, but also from other locals. I am sharing this next quote cautiously because I know how shitty Westerners can be when spirituality is brought up, especially with POC, and triple that with the global South. But this is a widespread superstition in so many cultures globally, and I think it's relevant to bring it up on how it has influenced sexual abuse here. Among the prevailing superstitions in the region is the belief that having sex with a virgin girl will enhance one's luck in the mines. While I was in Kovezi, Mutindi of Good Shepherd showed me photographs of the bruised corpse of an 8-year-old girl who had been abducted and raped by a Krasur the previous week. The minor was later apprehended, and she sent me a video of him in prison. Children frequently die while being raped. In one case, Mutindi said she saw the body of an 18-month-old infant who had been raped by a Krasur. Again, not a superstition exclusive to Congo. But we do see these leading to the assault and abuses of children from locals. Authorities are raping and assaulting women to allow them to go into the mines to try and gain cobalt and gain money, as well as, again, just as a basic means of oppressing the women in the area. This is also having a major impact on the environment that they are living in and their economy. Videos of Kusulo taken during the height of the 2014 cobalt rush show orange tarpaulins covering fresh pits and bags of minerals littering the streets. Michael Kavanagh, a journalist, visited this district a year later and published an article in the Times observing that the profusion of holes made it look as if it had been bombed. At one point, after Krasur's tunnel beneath the main road running west to Angola, the road collapsed. The so-called cobalt rush has resulted in untold deaths and widespread contamination of the area's water, soil, and air, and it is destroying the ecosystem and again, the clean water sources. When you extract the minerals, the waste is dumped in the environment where people live. In the river, the waste poisons the fish. The people who use this water become ill. Children are born with birth defects. So let's talk about what we can do and what's going on today in order to try and resist this. There was recently a lawsuit from several people who had been child minors in the mines suing big tech companies for not doing enough to pressure the company to pressure the companies that are doing the mining out of the abuses that they are heavily benefiting from. And that is one of the main areas a lot of people are going to look for this as just negligent complicity from these big tech companies. Companies at the top of the chain, big tech and EV companies, will say, we buy cobalt from ABC mining company, and there's no child labor or artisanal labor. And the assumption is, who's going to get down there and demonstrate otherwise? Unfortunately, the suit was not successful. The decision had been that the plaintiffs had not adequately alleged the tech companies participated in a venture because there is no shared enterprise between the companies and the suppliers who facilitated the labor. The tech companies own no interest in their suppliers, nor do the tech companies share in the suppliers' profits and risk. Although a formal business relationship is not necessary to be a participant in a venture, something more than engaging in an ordinary buyer-seller transaction is required to establish participation in an unlawful venture. But when historically we've seen legalized oppression and outlawed freedom fighting, the courts should not be where we depend on for change. I think we have to get past the idea of strategic litigation and making legal arguments and appeal to the moral and ethical imperative of ensuring that when you say your supply chain is untainted by child labor or forced labor or hazardous labor or degrading labor or environmental destruction, that you actually put boots on the ground and make sure that's true, rather than just have your marketing teams put out statements saying that is what's happening. And social pressure could do a lot here, but only if we do not bow at displays rather than consistent, meaningful material efforts. When Tesla had reduced its average cobalt use by more than 60%, it is now using cobalt-free batteries in its new car models. The EV automaker has also inked a long-term deal with the world's largest mining companies, Glencore, for 6,000 tons of DRC cobalt a year. The deal suggests that Congolese cobalt will continue to be a crucial resource for battery manufacturers, according to the World Economic Forum's white paper on artisanal cobalt extraction in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And the same thing has happened with companies, even when in the face of child deaths in those mines. In the past, Hayo openly bought cobalt from artisanal miners. Then in 2016, Amnesty International concluded the company most likely benefited from child labor. Ohio pledged to clean up its act. It committed to ridding its supply chain of child mined cobalt and promised to help make artisanal mining a safer source of work for the many people who rely on it. But no apology, nothing. They take our cobalt. They take our copper and cobalt. When a child dies in the mines, they are nowhere to be found. And that's because that's how these things always go. The powers that be keep us tired, so that way when we do resist, they know we'll get too tired to continue and will take anything that will make us feel like we are justified in no longer caring, even lying to our faces about what the situation looks like. There's a funny thing that happens at the bottom of the global economy, and it's this sort of contest of storytelling. And there's a certain story that's told outside of the global south, in this case outside of the Congo, about what's going to happen on the ground. It's used as a misdirection or smokescreen to do what? To persuade you and I to keep consuming, to not worry about it. Again, you have to keep pushing for more than just a promise or performance of change. In the same breath, you have to say we're also allocating resources to make sure that doesn't lead to this cascading eruption of violence and suffering for the places where these components and metals required for this transition are being mined. Another idea that has come up for what can be done, where we can go, where we can look to try and make the situation better, is to mine elsewhere. And the number one issue with that is the ore in the Congo, the cobalt in the Congo, is of an extremely high quality. It is purer than most cobalt reserves in other parts of the world, alongside the fact that other places with cobalt veins don't have the amount of purity that the DRC has. The locations of ones, at least in the US, could very easily bring about new oppressive dynamics, or rather a new edition of the same dynamic we've continuously had. But these new domestic mines needed to produce the raw materials for EV batteries could also encroach on indigenous land. Several metals like cobalt have been found within 35 miles of Native American reservations. This includes 97% of nickel, 89% of copper, 79% of lithium, and 68% of cobalt reserves in the U.S. found MSCI ESG research. In order to prevent harming Native communities, Benjamin says the Bureau of Land Management should adopt stricter policies that prohibit mining at sacred sites on reservations in nearby areas regarded as culturally important, and guarantee tribal leaders a seat at the table. Benjamin adds they should really have a say in whether or not these projects move forward, and they don't at the moment. And we've unfortunately just seen how these things play out with the oil pipelines, with railways, and with even a fucking telescope. Indigenous land, culture, and safety will be disregarded in the name of imperial gain. Economically, there are several other pushes going around that I would like to talk about, mainly the idea of buying used and refurbished tech. And I think that that is a concept, the idea that we should buy refurbished tech to solve this issue, comes less from any actual practical understanding and practical impact on the Congo, and more because at the end of the day, refurbished tech that has been refurbished and renewed, one of the most likely things to be replaced in that tech is the battery. And I think the issue that we are having with people pushing for that idea and pushing people to get used and refurbished tech is it is coming from people who are not educated in tech and educated in these processes. And the decisions, again, because they're not educated on the topic, because they're not looking for information on how these things work, they're assuming, for the most part, I guess, it's people basing their decision on what they think this progress should look like, what they think this protest or this help should look like. They're basing it more so on what they believe to be a poor person's interaction with tech consumerism, and by giving up their privilege in that way, they feel like they've done enough. But again, refurbished tech often has a new battery, and so you're taking a device that has now had 2 batteries in it, and there are several other issues with used, refurbished, older tech that no one is practically taking time to like look at like how do these devices hold up with modern protocols, like can they connect to any of your other devices, how do they connect to the internet, to different Wi-Fi protocols. No one's aware of these issues, and no one feels the need to look out to people who understand these issues to actually have those people lead the discussion on what the future of tech consumerism needs to look like. They feel no need to include people who understand tech in that conversation. And so they're basing their information off of their own biases of what tech privilege is, but that's not the same as what is going to reduce the amount of cobalt being produced and being consumed. I'm not an expert in tech consumerism, but I do think, because again, batteries are going to be replaced in these techs. I think that if you need a new device, get a new device, but divest from companies we know act negligently and carelessly about the harm for their staff and for the people in their supply chain. So don't buy, if you don't need if you don't need an iPad, if you don't need it for its like cutting edge features, if you are only using it for reading or for watching TV, get a tablet from a different company. Don't like divest from these major companies that we know have major abuses all throughout their supply chain. Buy a new device if you need a new device, but use it until it's dead. Use it all the way down. And then here's another idea that would probably require far bigger investment beyond just an individual decision. Community decision and community explanation expansion could potentially be better than just an individual decision, but that would require learning and spreading information about this. But this would be investing in device recycling. Recycling these rechargeable devices could be a major solution to decrease global reliance on mining, while also lowering the cost to consumers and reducing the environmental impact of electronic waste. Redwood Materials, a battery and e-waste recycling company founded by former Tesla Chief Technology Officer J.B. Straubel, specializes in recovering materials like cobalt. The company takes spent lithium-ion batteries, breaks them down, and extracts their metals, including cobalt, lithium, copper, and nickel, to reuse them for new batteries. That is something that learning, sharing about, and pressuring for investment in could be a solution, could be a much better solution. But again, like, the buying refurbished devices has no grounds in the reality of how that tech is refurbished. But that overall is all that I have to talk about for the Congo today. Remember, links are down below. Books, Friends of the Congo is a great YouTube resource to check out. They're linked down below. And GoFundMe's to support and donate to. But that is, all from me today. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, Valedictions friends.